Spinny, spinny. There we are. Welcome to the neighborhood. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Yes, it is.
And I have two fabulous neighbors here, Sabrina and Jordan from the Crisis Center. Is it Denver Crisis Center or is it called Crisis Center?
It's Crisis Center,
Okay.
and we serve the 18th and 23rd judicial districts. So that's Arapahoe, Lincoln, Albert, and Douglas County.
So all the South Metro area here
Correct.
in Denver.
Yes.
I was going to say, we always call it Crisis Center. And this is a special guest. I don't know why it's taken this long to get you in here, but it's exciting that you guys are here because
Thank you.
February is Teen
Dating.
Domestic Violence
Yes.
Awareness or Dating Awareness.
Correct. It's Teen Dating Violence Awareness
Right.
Month every February. And so it's really important that people are aware.
Which is interesting
how it
because
impacts
it's funny
teens.
that we have like a month dedicated to this when every single day should be dedicated to this.
Yes.
But you guys at the Crisis Center in February really focus on educating and informing people just about some of the dangers that teens might encounter. Tell me what your role is at the Crisis Center.
Sure. I'm the development coordinator. So I've been with the Crisis Center, gosh, it'll be 3 years in March.
Wow.
Yeah. And I really enjoy it. A big part of my job is just going out, getting corporate sponsors, gala sponsors, third party event opportunities. But everybody that knows me knows that my passion is just really talking about domestic violence, breaking down the myths, educating the community, and preventing, hopefully, more domestic violence happening in our communities. So, yeah.
Very important. I thought you had been there a lot longer. Where were you before?
I was with another domestic violence agency for 10 years prior to
That's probably
jumping
why.
over.
I was like, wait,
yeah,
I thought you were there longer, but
yeah.
okay. And Jordan, how about you? What do you do there?
Yeah, I'm our intake coordinator. So I half of the time I work our crisis line. So 5 days a week I'm working our crisis line.
Wow.
And then the other part of my time I'm doing intakes with people who want to come into our services.
So they may have called in
Mhm.
and then you invite them to come in so that you can plug them into resources and help kind of navigate the system.
Yep, I go through our intake process and I go through our wait list and I get them connected with the appropriate kind of service that they're looking for at that time.
Okay. So we've known you for, I mean, it seems like the whole time we've been open, I feel
I
like.
think so.
Like 4 or 5 years.
I was lucky.
Yeah, I was lucky. We were lucky. And just getting to meet you. And then, of course, we're at the chamber together and we do a lot of the events. And you're here at the village all the time.
I am. Yeah.
And you're one of the partners that we're always referring and connecting to all the nonprofits here. And you guys just do so much in the community. But I'm curious, like, what drew you to this work?
Well, that's so interesting because I ended up in nonprofit because of a personal medical experience. So I ended up working at a breast cancer organization early on back in 2008. And the lady that was the executive director was just amazing. And she moved on actually 4 months after I permanently became on staff, became my actual staff because I was a volunteer and then a temp staff and all of that. She moved on to a domestic violence agency 4 months after I got on staff. So I said, I'd love to work with her again. And so as my career developed, when it just serendipity, there was a position open where she was and I applied and that was 2012.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's your journey. How about you? How did you come to this position?
Oh, well, I went to CSU for school and I went into social work.
Go Rams.
Yes, go Rams. they're the better one.
Wait, you don't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go Rams.
Go
We have
Rams.
Taylor went to CSU. My other daughter Bailey went to CU.
Okay.
So we always had the Rams buffs.
Rivalry.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like,
yeah.
I kind of could do this for both.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of both.
Yeah.
And what were you doing there at school?
I got my bachelor's in social work.
Okay.
And in order to graduate, I needed an internship. And I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life.
Interesting. Which
but
we still don't.
Right.
Like, in your 50s
never
and
really
60s,
do.
you're still looking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You
don't
never
think you're
really
there.
do.
Yeah.
No, but a local domestic violence shelter was looking for interns, and I was like, sure, why not? Let's give it a go. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I learned
Wow.
so much in that
Mhm.
internship, and I've just kind of stuck with it. I love teaching people about domestic violence. I love being a support person for people who are currently experiencing that and have no
Right.
idea what to do or how to navigate things. So
Mhm.
That's
it's
awesome.
become a passion. So
Well,
And
you
you've
guys do
been
big
with the
work.
crisis center for what, at least 5 years,
yeah,
right?
it'll be 6 in June.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you said you take calls 5 days a week?
Mhm.
That's a lot. Like,
Yeah.
how do you help yourself decompress or leave some of that when you go
Yeah.
home?
Yeah, I feel like I'm really good at compartmentalizing, so
Oh,
that helps a
interesting.
lot. But I try to keep it as like this is a thing that's happening to somebody else, and at the end of the
Mhm.
day, I just kind of I don't worry about work. I don't
Yeah.
have my work phone with me. I just have to create that distance from that, and it helps. I don't see clients directly, so even though I work with them on the crisis line and I
Right.
do intakes and things like that. I don't have a caseload most of the time.
Mhm.
So that's helps a little bit. So I can hear their story and what they're struggling with and then know
Connect
that I've
them.
already connected them with
Right.
somebody who will help them with that next step. And that's really rewarding and helpful for me, kind of being
Yeah.
able to live outside of
I was gonna
work.
say that would be so hard. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, a friend of
Yeah.
mine is she's the chaplain at the prisons, and just I talked to her and I'm like, I don't know how you take all this home sometimes,
Mhm,
when you're working with helping, you're the helper all day.
mhm.
So which I want to come back to a couple things on domestic violence for anybody, but first I want to talk about teens and dating. Like, what are some stats out there about teens and dating and the situation with a violent person that they're dating? Are there statistics that
Yeah.
you have that kind of sheds the light for us?
Absolutely. Do you want to take it,
Sure,
Jordan?
yeah.
Okay.
So I think the biggest thing is that like 71% of young people report being in their very first relationship by the age of 15. So
Frank,
Mhm.
so
yeah,
it's super
super
young
young.
and if they haven't been modeled a healthy relationship or they don't have supports in their lives where they feel like they can depend on people or talk to people about things, then they get into relationships and they don't really know. At 15, you think you know everything,
True.
but
Mhm.
you don't.
Usually by 13, you think you know.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you just hop into this
Yeah,
relationship
keep it going.
absolutely not knowing anything,
Right.
and then it's
How should I be
unhealthy and then
treated?
turns
Right.
abusive, but you don't see that. You don't really recognize what those kind of yellow flags are that
Right.
then maybe lead to red flags, and then you're kind of stuck in a situation.
Which Sabrina, you're always saying, run away from red flags.
Right. Run from red
Keep all the green
flags.
flags around.
Yes.
Exactly.
And the yellow flags, you better be aware. Yeah. Know
Exactly.
what to look for.
Exactly.
And
Um,
so when you
Yeah.
don't know what those green flags are, you're used to maybe yellow flags,
Yeah.
and then yellow flags lead into red flags, and you don't know what to do. You think that's normal, and so you don't do anything about it, or you don't think it's wrong or that you
Mhm.
deserve more.
Right.
And so it just bubbles from there.
That is interesting. Yeah. And anything else that you
Oh, absolutely. Well, so the highest incidence of domestic violence is between the ages of 16 and 24.
really?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's surprising. I would have thought it was kind of once you're married or in a relationship for several years. So it's
Right.
those early years
Exactly.
that form the patterns, unfortunately,
Correct.
as well.
Correct. And then the other piece of that is I forget what the percentage is. You might remember, Jordan, but it's pretty high of kids, teenagers that never reveal that they were
True.
abused. They don't tell their parents, they don't tell their peers, right? And then you have the other piece where 81% of parents either don't recognize that teen dating violence is a problem or don't really understand the issue and know how to help.
Right. Yeah. Because how many parents don't even know, like maybe they're not even around the person they're dating.
Right.
I mean, which is sad because again, I feel like, okay, coming from a place of privilege, like we always made sure the boys came over and met our daughters and we
Mhm.
got to know them before they ever got to go out. But
Mhm.
I
That's not the
know,
case
not
for
the case. No.
everybody.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And then we never let them go on dates, just two people until they were over
Mhm.
16. There had to be group dates. So there's a lot of things. If you just have young preteens, these are things to do now. you
Yes,
know?
absolutely.
But it's like once your kids are dating, what are some signs that parents or people in their lives, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's an aunt or a grandparent, what are signs that you look for?
I think one of the biggest things is kind of the isolation piece where like maybe your kiddo is so used to spending time with you, or you do set those boundaries of I need to meet this person that you date before you like go out with them. Um, but then they like they go into that relationship anyway, and then they spend time with that person. That person says that they want all of their time, and so they
Mhm.
kind of you find them kind
Pulling
of pulling
away.
back, pulling away, or being defiant, like not wanting to. Which a lot of it is like that's just kind of like what kids
Teens, I
do.
know that's what's
Right.
hard as
Right.
parents. You're going, is this just being weird
Right.
teens?
But I think like you do notice a shift. Even
Yeah.
if they're used to pulling away from you, they are more secretive. You still see a shift in
But
their
they never want to come
behavior.
over for dinner. They never want to hang out with the family.
Right. Or be like,
Mhm.
oh, I have plans with so and so, or I'm not going to come home after school. I'm going to go to the mall or whatever.
Right.
You don't know what they're doing. They could be with a partner, they could be with friends, but still there's a shift in that behavior.
Parents.
Right. And then often the partner too. I mean, they may even come and meet the parents and the parents are charmed,
I was just
right?
going to say they're probably very
Right.
charming personalities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that as time goes by, they're going to try to isolate them even from their family, right? Their friends and family. So they may start saying, "Hey, I don't want to be at your parents' house. Let's hang out at the park or
Right.
whatever. I don't want to be around your parents anymore." And it really becomes about what the perpetrator wants. When you get in that relationship, like the the person that's experiencing the violence gets so caught up in wanting to please the other person and thinking it's their fault. Um,
And when you're that
that
age, you
yeah,
don't know. Like maybe that's normal behavior for somebody
Mhm.
that's, I'm in a relationship with, I should do these things. Or
sure,
if they threaten me or make comments, then maybe
Right.
that's
Or
normal.
they're doing all of these things or saying all of these things out of love. Like,
right,
"Oh, I love you so much.
Right.
Why would you do that?"
Right.
Or "You need to spend all of your time with me because I'm important, right? Aren't
yeah. If you
I?"
truly
Right.
loved me, you wouldn't want to spend time with other
With
people.
other
You would want
people.
to spend all your time with me.
Right.
Mhm.
And so knowing, and again, this is one of those things, unless teens are watching, which I doubt,
I
but
doubt.
I
Yeah.
doubt. But as parents, having these conversations when your kids are young, starting, I mean, I even say when they're 3, 4, and 5 years old,
Mhm.
how do they see mom and dad interact?
Right.
Does dad take girls? Do mom take boys out on dates
Yeah.
to talk about how you should be treated
Mhm.
on dates? Like those are things that I've always thought, okay, you have to do that when they're very young to start teaching.
Mhm.
This is how you should be treated. This is how anybody should treat you.
Mhm.
Don't allow
Correct.
somebody. But again, not everybody has that, family setup that's
Mhm.
going
Sure.
to be doing that. So it may be that
Right.
this teen feels like I've never felt loved, and now here's somebody saying I love you,
Right.
and I'm 14, and
Mhm.
somebody loves me. This is the first time. They're going to be
Right.
very vulnerable.
Absolutely.
So what are other signs that we should be looking for in teens?
Definitely mood changes, and again, the isolation. But what I would say is more important than looking because you already know your child's dating, right? At
Right.
that point, I would say
Hopefully.
let's step
Yeah,
back.
maybe. Yeah.
Hopefully, something's going on. They're not
Right.
home. They're being secretive, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. But I would say take a step back and, like you had said, start talking to your children young. Start if you can, if you have a healthy relationship, model that healthy
Right.
relationship, but really model consent and boundaries,
And talk about what does
right?
that
And
mean?
talk
And
about
yeah.
it, right? Talk about what a healthy relationship is and how, relationships aren't a spectrum. They're not happy all the time.
Right.
You're not always skipping through a meadow, right? You have bumps in the
Wait, what?
road, right?
What?
Yeah.
Wait. I'm shocked right now.
I know. I'm sorry to crush your dreams.
Oh,
But do you know what I mean? But to have realistic expectations. the problem is when, a child grows up in an abusive home, especially if there's no physical violence involved. And I
Right.
mean, that's one of the myths that I'm constantly breaking down, that there does not have to be physical violence for it to
It
be abuse,
right. It
right?
doesn't have to
But if
be
you grew
generational. Yeah.
right, but if you grew up in a home where that's the love language that you're learning is yelling, your parents are yelling at each other all the time, it's a
Right.
very unhealthy dynamic. How do you know any better unless somebody intervenes and teaches you different skills?
Which schools are now
Right.
doing a better job of talking about what does
Correct.
consent mean,
Yes.
and boundaries, setting boundaries. But again, you have to be in class to hear those
Mhm.
things, and that may not be the case. So yeah, it is one of those things. I know teachers are probably going through training these days
Mhm.
on what to look for, how they can help and intervene. But if it is a teen that's wanting help, or a parent, like, who's most likely in a situation of teen dating violence, who's
Mhm.
most likely to call? Is it the parent or is it the teen?
Yeah, I feel like in like domestic violence in general, I feel like a lot of people don't love to accept that they're maybe in an unhealthy or an
Right.
abusive relationship. So
They
we
make
do get a
excuses.
lot,
Yeah.
we do get a lot of calls from people on behalf of
Oh, that's
others.
interesting. Yeah.
And really like for teens specifically, I think that's really important. Like, yes, you can be concerned as a parent, but not to tell them like, oh, you're in an abusive relationship, you need to get out, you need help. Um, because that's probably not going to be reciprocated very
I was just
well.
gonna say, here's a hot tip from any parent. The second you
Exactly.
tell them not to see somebody,
Right. They're
Oh,
going to
yeah.
they're
want
gonna
to do
bond
It's
it.
the
even
whole
more,
forbidden fruit,
and
right?
they'll feel protective of that person.
Well, and they're going to
Exactly.
stop
Yeah.
talking to you,
Right.
Exactly.
right?
And
They're going to
that's the
stop
last
talking
That's
thing
to
we
true.
you.
want. Yeah.
Yeah.
So providing like you can tell them like, oh, I don't think this is a safe relationship and here's why. And then here's all of these supports out there if you want to explore it more. And I'm available
Right.
if you want to talk about it. I think that's the best way to go around it because like you don't have to you're not telling them what to do. You're not
Right.
telling them anything, but
Yeah.
you're letting them know like I'm a support person. But if you don't think I'm a support person, then here's these other support
Here are
people.
these other
Resources. Right.
resources. So one would be our
That's
crisis
true.
line, right? And the really nice thing in the state of Colorado is that kids as young as 12 can access services without parental consent.
Oh, without parental consent.
Correct.
Oh,
So just
interesting.
providing that crisis line, and I know it's hard for parents, but letting go and letting that know that the person that is helping your child is an expert in domestic violence, and the safety of our clients is always number one,
Mhm.
right? We never tell our clients what they need to do. We're
Right.
trauma informed. We offer them all their choices and let them choose, right? And that it doesn't, yeah, a 13, 14-year-old, it's going to be the same kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
really up to them. Do they want to tell their parent that they're getting services? But I would say to any parent, be glad if they are and they're not
Mhm.
talking, even if they're not talking to you, because know that they're learning really great skills and they're learning how to be safe and how to
Right.
safely exit themselves from
Which
that relationship should
one
they
thing
choose.
I know just from having 4 children and surviving teenage years 4 times, barely, is sometimes as a parent, you don't know how to talk to your kids. You don't have that a relationship. Maybe you're in the middle of some storm that you have going on, that you don't know how to have a communication, an open dialogue without it escalating into a screaming
Mhm.
match. One thing I always advise parents is write a letter to your child,
I love that.
and it takes the emotion out.
Mhm.
You can write just, here's some things I'm observing, or here's something that I feel, and I'm so afraid for this to happen, but I want you to have these resources, and give them the resources. Put the crisis center phone number, the contacts, any information you have. But sometimes in writing, you can leave it there. They may read it and throw it away, but they read it.
Mhm.
They may read it and bawl their eyes out and write back to you.
Yeah.
And one of my sons, we had a whole year after he was at Columbine during the shootings, and
Oh,
we had it was 2 years later. We had horrible time communicating without emotions. Just, I mean, emotions cloud your
Mhm.
conversation. And so I just one day I just was at my wits end, going, I have to be able to communicate to him how I feel, and I just wrote pages and pages and pages, left it on his bed. Probably, he'll read it and throw it away. But about a week later, it was back on my dresser. And I thought he just threw it in my room to get rid of it. And I opened it and he had written pages and pages back. And it
Aw.
was a whole year of he and I kind of journaling to each other. But it really showed me this is true in marriages, in any relationship where you just feel like we never can have a conversation without it getting too emotional.
Mhm.
And sometimes writing and providing great resources is a wonderful way
Yeah.
to be able to share. Because as a parent, I would be so afraid. And if my child was going down that path and you start going into lecture mode, they shut down.
Mhm.
They're just
Absolutely.
shutting down. And again, you'll
Absolutely.
drive them closer to that person.
Correct. You're just
Um,
helping the perpetrator further isolate them.
Right.
Right.
And I
Right.
would
And that's
think,
not what you want.
especially, it's probably one of the signs is lower self-esteem
Oh,
with
absolutely.
Yeah.
the
So,
victims.
yeah. So, changes in sleeping patterns,
Mm.
eating patterns, all those kind of typical signs you might see with depression or
And you know what's weird?
anxiety.
When you have
But
teens, don't you always see those?
right. But
I'm
but
like,
did
is
a
that
partner just enter the picture?
true? You have to start putting
Right? And the other thing to really look out for as a parent is the love bombing. A lot of times these relationships start out just so romantic and the person is just so they're everything you dreamed of,
right.
right? Like, yeah, and a bag of chips,
Oh,
right? Like
you're like, he's
they're just
15.
perfect, right? Um,
What does he know?
yeah. So, just really be
Oh,
wary. I mean,
so scary.
perpetrators can be very charming
Yeah.
and manipulative. So they can have everyone fooled,
Right.
including the
Relationships
parents,
don't
right?
start out abusive. Like you
Never.
have to
Yeah.
you have to hook them first, you know.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you're love bombing. You're saying, "Oh, I love you so much. I've never met anybody like you." You're giving them all of these gifts, making it seem like you're the best person ever.
Mhm.
Like you're the best person for them, they're the
Right.
best person for you. And then eventually, like it's all to get power and control over somebody. That's like that's what domestic violence is a
Right.
pattern of abusive behaviors in order to maintain power and control over another person. And so when things escalate, it's when that person feels that they're now losing that power and control that they've so desperately tried to build
Right.
and take. So that's kind of
That's why it's
the
so
love
important
bombing
that
part.
parents know. I mean, I always go back to there's so many cases, unfortunately, that make the news, right? And this one was a few years ago, and it was down south. And I believe she was 14. She broke up with her boyfriend. He came in and killed her.
At her home.
In her home. Um, and I'm sure she didn't realize, and her parents didn't realize how much danger she was in. But when these relationships get really deep, the risk of homicide goes up 75% when someone leaves an abuser. And that's why it's so important that our services are free, confidential, and trauma informed, and not only include the crisis line, but emergency shelter services, community based advocacy, legal advocacy, all of these programs, therapy, all of these programs that really provide not only counseling and safety planning, but also access to wraparound services, because we want to help people that enter our services not just get free from violence, but to get and stay self-sufficient. So we're breaking that cycle of violence for that family.
And this is not
Right.
just for teens.
Not
This
just
is
for
for
teens.
anybody,
Everybody.
men,
Yeah.
women,
Correct.
teens, anybody
Correct.
12 and older
Correct.
who finds themselves in
Absolutely.
a scary situation, which I know we've had in our restrooms here for a long time, thanks to
Mhm.
you, little cards that say, kind of signs to look at. And one of them was the financial control.
Yes.
And I thought that is interesting because you hear that a lot, especially with women, to
Yes.
say, he controls the money. I can't spend money or
Right. Or I've been
um,
a stay-at-home mom
right.
for so long because he said that he'd be the sole
Provider.
provider, and so I didn't need to worry about that.
Right.
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 And it does cripple that person, that victim, because they don't think they can leave. What would I do? I have no
Yes.
money.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely. That's why our services are free.
Right.
And we also have the wraparound services. But what's interesting is you would think that only impacts people that are grown, right? That are living on their own. But it can actually, even the economic inequality can happen in a teen relationship
Oh,
as
Yeah,
interesting.
well.
it just looks a little bit different.
Yeah.
Like
Do you want to talk about that?
I
a bit?
love
Yeah.
a story like back in high school. I knew somebody who was dating somebody, and they would go back and forth of like, oh, I bought lunch today, so you're going to buy lunch the next time we hang out. And it was very equal. And then there was one day where the guy was like, oh, hey, I'm kind of strapped for money today. Do you mind it's not your day, but do you mind getting it today? So they're like, oh, yeah, sure, whatever. And then later that day, the guy posted on Facebook about this super cool video game that he just bought that was like $60. So like that's not abusive.
Right.
That's not even necessarily unhealthy. Like
Sus.
exactly. It's a little sus.
Little
Yeah.
sus.
But you know, like
Yeah.
having then a conversation of like, hey, I think that was kind of like rude that you didn't like you weren't honest with me about why you didn't want to spend money on lunch today. Like you
Right.
could have just told me. So it's like
Mm.
those little things that don't seem like they're very big, and
But
in
they're
that
not
one
open and
moment they're
honest,
not
right.
big. But if that behavior continues, that's when it bleeds into the red flags, the kind of abusive and super unhealthy kind of behavior. So
Right.
even though it's different in a teen relationship, it's still
Still can
it's
happen.
damaging. Or
Right.
if like you're always like when you're 16, you get your driver's license and you can drive, and that's super exciting until you realize, ooh, I have to pay for gas for this. So if you're with a partner and I'm driving them everywhere, and so I'm having to spend a lot on gas, but they're
Right.
not willing to help me or to drive
Interesting.
their own, that's when
Right.
it can become kind of abusive, you
Abusive,
know?
Right.
Yeah.
Or they may be like, oh, you have a car and insurance and a job.
Right.
So while you're at work, your part-time job at, the mall or whatever, I'll take your car
Oh,
and
yeah.
go do whatever I want.
Right.
Well,
Yeah. It's our
right.
car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
our car.
Yeah.
Our car.
No.
Yeah.
I do want to say we do a big disservice, especially to youth, but all of us, right? On, just saying that you have to be in a relationship to be a full person, right?
Yeah.
And I'd like to change that script
Right.
a lot. And when you look at like, the puppy love and all the romantic tropes, a lot of those are really, they're in line with red flags. Like they only want to spend time with me.
Right.
Isn't that so romantic?
Isn't that romantic?
No, it's not romantic.
Right.
It's a red flag.
red
Or even
flag.
like
Right.
on the
Right.
like playground of like, oh, he's picking on you because he likes you.
Right.
Exactly.
It's like,
Yes.
That is
no,
interesting.
no, we
Yes.
don't want to be with people who keep picking on us and put
Wow,
us
which is
down.
so interesting. In
Right.
kindergarten, you say things
Uh-huh.
like that.
Absolutely.
They usually are
It's
picking
supposed
on
to,
you
like,
because they like
gloss
you.
over things, but really that instills something in
Yeah.
us of like, oh, he's jealous. That's super cool. I want that. And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no, I want
Teaching our
someone
kids
secure in
young.
themselves
Yeah.
and me.
And what are your boundaries and what is
Mhm.
not acceptable behavior
Exactly.
at a very early age, and talking
Exactly.
about it in the home and talking
Yeah.
about it everywhere.
Exactly.
Which is
Talking
why I
about
think like we need to
consent
do
Yeah.
and all
so
of
much
that.
more
Yeah.
for like the preventive piece,
Oh.
preventative piece. There we
Mhm.
go. Because if you don't have a support person, you don't think your parents are a support person, what about your peers?
Right.
If I don't know this stuff, how do I know that my peers know this stuff too?
Right.
And if they don't know it, how are they supposed to talk to me about it too?
Right.
So I think that's a really big thing when we do talk with younger people about what dating violence is and what healthy relationships are, that it is good for them and their peers. So if they don't feel comfortable going to adults, then somebody else might be able to say something if they
Right.
see that their friend is in an abusive or scary situation.
And that's why I would like to see, because we do, right? We do go into the schools and talk about teen dating violence and green flags and red flags and yellow flags and all of that. But we don't do it in a way that I would like to see us do it, which is more consistent and interactive.
Right.
When you go and lecture kids, how
They're
much
on their
is
phones.
actually getting
They're on their
in
phones
and
the whole
staying
time.
in?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I want it to be more interactive and long term so that you're going back and you're really interacting with the kiddos and really talking deep about relationships. Because the one thing I want to say is, all healthy relationships begin with you. And it begins with good self-esteem,
Right.
right? And having those boundaries and all of those kinds of things. And so how you can start working on that very young with kids.
And that's what I was
Right.
going to say.
Yeah.
What age do you guys go into schools?
Right now, it's usually high
Yeah,
school.
which is sad.
But I
Right.
think
That's
I
so late.
honestly
Yeah.
think they're already dating. Like the statistics
Right.
she said earlier, and from my own personal experience, my kids were dating
Yeah.
in middle school, right?
Right.
They didn't see each other outside of school.
You go, we're going
But
around. Yeah.
yeah,
Or
but
whatever
you
I
know
say
that
now.
that
Yeah.
concept's already there.
Right.
So let's be talking to them before or
Oh,
as they're starting to talk
yeah.
about
Which
this
is
stuff,
interesting. And
right?
maybe there is already like curriculum out there in grade school to talk about. Again, I know there is something because Taylor's daughter, Ophelia, is 6. So she's in first grade this year. But they had a situation where on the playground, the Dragon Girls
Uh-huh.
had a club. And then there was, I can't remember what the boys group was, but the Dragon Girls were teasing and chasing the boys, and the boys were chasing them. And the and the teacher had to write a letter home to all the parents, and it was hilarious because it said, "We have a situation. If you ever saw West Side Story, we currently have the Dragon Girls gang and the boys gang."
Oh,
And
no.
but it was like they had to have a conversation in class
Yeah.
about what it means to say no and what it means to say
Yes.
stop um and and it was just interesting that it was like, oh yeah, in kindergarten and first grade they're already having to have these. But it's like, I wonder, is that curriculum that is in the schools and grade school, or is it just this was a brilliant teacher who observed it and stopped,
I probably a brilliant teacher, but to that point, you know, when we're talking about healthy relationships curriculum, we're not just talking about healthy boyfriend girlfriend relationships. It's all
Any.
relationships,
Right.
right?
How
How
should I be treated?
correct. And how
And
how should I treat others?
how should I treat others? Yeah,
Right.
and having those
Yeah.
conversations.
Mhm.
And then as you get older, I mean, I'm sure if you were a teen and you were in an abusive relationship as a teen, you're more likely to continue that pattern
Mhm.
into other relationships as an adult.
Absolutely.
And when you find yourself as an adult in these situations, um, it's harder, it's scarier. You might have kids, you might have, you know, jobs that you can't leave or
Yes.
be out sick. So it becomes so important to have resources. And I think everybody
Absolutely.
knows, oh, I'm sure there's a hotline somewhere, or I'm sure there's help out there. You mentioned wraparound services. Like what services can someone who's in a situation kind of take advantage of or find with the crisis center?
I'm gonna let Jordan take that
Oh,
because she's our resource guru.
Yeah.
yay.
So at the Crisis Center, we have community-based advocacy, legal advocacy, and therapy services. And anybody can engage in any or all of those.
What's community based?
So community-based advocacy is when a person can work one-on-one with an advocate, and that advocate is there to be an extra support for that person and to connect them with some community resources to help them navigate whatever they need to. So if they want to leave their relationship, kind of looking at what that looks like for them, what their options are. So they're not having to figure it out on their own.
Right.
If somebody maybe isn't ready to leave their relationship, or maybe it's not safe to leave their relationship right now, because as you said, the rate of it being escalated and turning violent gets higher when
When you say
we're
you're
about to
leaving.
leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it's not the right time, but we can still safety plan where they're at now, how to keep them safe in their house now, while also kind of planning for what their next step is, whatever that might be. Again, we don't make decisions for them. We don't tell them that they need to leave. We don't tell them what to do. It's solely based on what are their goals and how do we
Right.
help them get there.
Wow, which is really helpful. And I was sharing before we talked, a friend of mine that is afraid because somebody has threatened to come back and get her. That you don't have to have been abused to contact the crisis center. You could feel threatened
Yes.
and get help.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you mentioned, there's so much more than just physical violence in
Right.
these relationships. So a lot of times people that we work with have never been physically abused,
But it's the
but it's
emotional and the
emotional, financial, all of those pieces that really impact your thinking and how you see the world and how
right.
you plan
Yeah,
your
and to
things.
that
So
point, besides our emergency shelter services, none of our services are time limited in the way that, you know, you have
Mm.
to be currently in a relationship or just
Oh,
exited.
interesting.
You know, trauma doesn't expire.
Right.
Black eyes and broken bones heal, right? But trauma doesn't unless you deal with it. So you can enter our therapy, our community-based advocacy services, all of that. It could be 10 years ago and you're just now
Wow.
dealing with it, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good to
So,
know.
but emergency shelter services are only for people in imminent
In
danger. So
imminent
they are
danger.
actually
Right.
leaving and yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, so you said there's a website somewhere that people can go to that has a bunch of resources. What was that one? It was Protect.
I think it's violence free.
Oh,
Oh, yes,
Violence
Violence Free
is
Colorado.
good
So
for the state.
violencefreecolorado.org.
Org.
Mhm.
Correct.
Violence and Colorado spelled out, violencefreecolorado.org. So lots of resources there.
It's for the entire state of Colorado. So they're going to have all of the different,
Okay.
as I mentioned earlier, I know everybody has heard me say this. I think every city and county should have its own domestic violence agency.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the resources just aren't there for that. So we all kind of work together. But, you know, depending on where you are, depends maybe on the survey, which agency you're going to go to, especially for like your community based advocacy, legal advocacy kind of stuff is really kind of specific to where you live, where emergency shelter services is kind of the demand's greater than the supply.
Right.
You
So we
go
don't care where
you
you're
need
calling
to.
from.
Wow.
If we have
Yeah.
a bed, we're going to give you
You're
a
going to
bed.
get it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
interesting. And the legal advocacy is so important. Is just
Mhm.
knowing, okay, this, I can have somebody help me do something about
Right.
it to keep that
Exactly.
person
What can I do legally
that
to
way.
keep
Yeah.
myself safe or distance myself from this person safely?
Yeah. To the point of, you know, as you age and, you know, you end up maybe married and children and all of these ties. That's one of the greatest things that our clients deal with besides, you know, housing needs,
Yeah.
needs for a lawyer, that kind of thing. But how do you parent with an abuser
Right.
and keep yourself safe and your kids
And your
safe?
kids safe.
Right? Because I mean, 9 times out of 10, you are going to have joint custody.
Right.
Right.
Just frightening.
So
Yeah.
it is, but that's something that we can, you know, not
Help
me, but
navigate
our,
through
our
the
staff
legal,
can help
right.
them. Yeah.
Um,
Navigate all of that.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So February, even though February is almost over,
I know.
February,
it's
March,
only
April,
halfway.
May, all year should be, yeah, teen dating violence awareness. Let's all become
Yeah.
those people who do look out. We've been having this conversation here because we said we have to look out for each other and look for signs, look for people that look like they need help and ask them,
Yeah.
you know, is there anything I can connect, a resource I can connect you to? And I mean, here we have so many amazing nonprofits. One group here, Refined, they help men and women who are in sexually violent relationships or have been sexually, assaulted,
Sexually
and
assaulted.
they
Yep.
help them get out of those relationships as well. And I'm sure those
So much
folks, you guys,
intersectionality.
work
Yeah.
together. We have groups here, local groups that are helping people who are trafficked, which usually starts from a domestic violence situation,
Yes.
or a dating violence. You know, they're so intertwined,
And that's so true. I'm so glad you mentioned the human trafficking
yeah,
piece
because we think of it as something in other countries.
Sure,
Uh-huh.
sure. But a lot of ways, especially with young girls and
Yeah.
boys, right? Somebody's going to come in and say, "Oh, I really like you.
You're
I
beautiful.
want to,
I can get,
you know, I'm going to
you
take
can
you
be on
away."
videos. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And
Yeah.
you think that you're falling in love with this
Oh,
one
yeah.
person, and next thing you know, that person's long gone. You're being trafficked.
They're pimping you out to their
Correct,
friends or
correct.
whoever, and you've now been trafficked. And these girls, I mean, I've heard stories of they take their IDs, they take their, they have no way
Get 'em
to
addicted to
leave.
drugs.
Yeah, they get them addicted to drugs. So it's like looking for signs early so that you don't fall into that.
Absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
What is the way for people to contact the crisis center? What's the easiest way? My phone is ringing and it shouldn't be. It's off. Yeah.
Do you want to give the
um,
crisis line number? or
yeah.
you want me
Yeah.
to?
So just calling our crisis line is the best. So that the number
I know. Is that funny?
688-8484.
Okay, wait.
303-688-8484.
Does it
Correct.
spell something?
No.
No.
No, but
Oh,
it
wow.
is manned 24/7, and it's manned all by our staff. Like
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
like if you
5
call
of
Monday through
us.
Friday at a certain time,
You're
you're probably
talking
going to
to-
talk to Jordan, right? But even we have relief staff that works at on the weekends and
So
holidays.
24.
But everybody is
Somebody's
it's
answering.
somebody
I
that
think
is
there's like
our
5
staff
of us
that's
that man
answers.
it every
And if you Google
Yeah.
Denver Crisis Center,
or just the
I mean,
crisis center.
the crisis center is that you're
Mhm.
going to get the phone number.
Mhm.
I was like, how
Yeah.
would they, if
Yeah.
they,
You're going to
okay.
get the phone
Yeah.
number. Absolutely.
Yeah. So look
Absolutely.
up
And I
you
also
know.
want to mention, because you mentioned Violence Free Colorado, but
Mhm.
I think the National Domestic Violence Hotline is also very important.
I think so too.
They have a lot of educational things on their website, but also you can call them, you can text them, you can email them. but they also have lots of resources kind of nationwide. So sometimes we'll get a call from somebody that we're like, oh, I just left Colorado. Now I'm in Texas.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And I receive services, and they can't receive services with us because they're no longer in our area. But then I can send them to the National Domestic Violence Hotline,
Yeah.
and an advocate there can get them connected with a service in their area, which is super cool.
Yeah. That there's
Yes.
absolutely help available.
Mhm.
And it
24/7.
is- It's
Yeah.
that whole thing of just get connecting to resources,
Yeah, it's
educate
just
yourself.
starting. Yeah.
If you have teens, preteens,
Yeah.
start educating yourself
Get
now.
educated and also learn how, if you're concerned about a family member, a loved one, a friend, learn how to talk to them, right?
Or reach out
Um,
to us and
reach out
have
to us.
conversations with
Yeah.
us. We
Right.
can
Yeah.
definitely help navigate those conversations too.
Which is nice.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the one key piece I would tell anyone is don't focus on the abuser, focus on their behavior. Because if
Oh,
you focus
interesting.
on the person, like say, oh, Johnny's terrible
don't
or
like him.
Mary's
Yeah.
terrible or whatever it is, they're going to get defensive and say, well, they're wonderful. Of course, I think they're wonderful. But if you focus on the behavior, right? How does it
The way
make
he
you
talked
feel
to you, the way
when Johnny won't let you go to
right.
the movies with all of us?
Right.
Or whatever it may be, right?
which is another myth because I'm always saying he as the perpetrator and the victim
And
always being
yeah,
a girl, but that's not always the
it
case.
is not always the
Um,
case. And
yeah.
we have had men in our emergency shelter
Right.
services. It certainly happens. And that's one of the myths we're breaking
Right.
down. We really want to get rid of the shame and the stigma that people that experience intimate partner violence feel. And that can be a barrier for them to get help. And we don't want them to
Right.
feel any shame or stigma. We just want to help them
And as
get free from
parents,
violence, right?
I think we have to trust our intuition. And then if you do have that gut feeling that there's something strange with this new relationship,
Yeah.
call and get help. Call
Yeah.
the resource, call and get
Yeah.
resources. Start digging in, educating yourself. Talk to somebody on the hotline and just say, this is why I kind of have this weird feeling about this person. This is what happened.
Mhm.
And to me, it's always those things that people say, I kind of had a feeling,
Yeah.
but they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Take
and
action.
know what to do.
Right.
Yeah. The other website that I would really recommend for teens specifically, but parents to look at as well, and also recommend to their teens is loveisrespect.org.
Loveisrespect.org.
Correct. It's
a
specifically
great
for
one.
teens. So all that information
Interesting.
about, what a healthy relationship is, what isn't healthy, all of that, they can access it. It's really written for them
Okay.
to be able to understand it.
Wow,
and
that's a
get
great
help.
one.
So,
Loveisrespect.org. Okay, great
Yeah.
resources. You guys are doing amazing work.
Thank you.
And I know we
Thank
have
you.
2 blood drives coming up.
We do. I know. In
I'm
one
like,
week. How
I
did
know,
that happen?
I know.
We didn't
I-
schedule that too well,
No.
but that's okay.
I know. We have one Friday
can't
and
have too
Saturday.
much
No,
fun.
Thursday.
Wednesday. Because I said Thursday, but I'm crazy.
It's
It's
tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's
And
tomorrow
then Saturday.
and
Yeah.
then Saturday here at the village, both of them.
Yes.
There are blood drives. So if you have good juicy veins and want to
Yes,
help out
please.
and donate blood, come down here because you do need to sign up and register.
You do need to make So if
So
you
they
go on
know.
bestchamber.com and you go on the event page, you can register through there.
Okay.
They'll ask you all the questions ahead of time, so you know that you're good to
You're
go.
good to go. You haven't
Um,
traveled somewhere that you can't come back and give
correct,
blood. I
correct.
remember that I had something else that I couldn't give blood because of something. Now I can't remember, but yeah, go on and check
And
the
they've
things
changed,
that-
and that's why I like to
Yeah.
tell people to check the eligibility because they've changed over the years,
Right.
right? They're not.
but you need
as
to
strict as
register so they know
used
how
to
many
be.
cookies and cups of juice to have for you.
Exactly, because they're going to give you're going to get treats, right? I mean, you don't
Exactly.
give blood and they just go get out of
No,
here,
no.
right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Um,
good luck.
And it's just such a wonderful way
is.
to help the community,
It
right?
is. It's needed.
From my own personal experience, because I know prior to me, having that experience, like I always thought of like blood donors as for people that are in an emergency surgery or they were in a car accident, some kind of trauma. I never realized it can be used to help people better, improve their lives. Like for me, when I was going through cancer treatment, I had anemia so bad.
Oh,
I
interesting.
had to have 2 different blood transfusions.
Wow.
And I tell you that it was like a miracle. The second they started giving me the blood, I felt immediately better.
Wow.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is interesting. My son was in a snowboarding accident and had to have blood because he tore his spleen open,
Oh gosh.
and for 48
Terrifying.
hours had lost so much blood they didn't think he would make it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just never know when you'll need to be the recipient
Yes.
or someone in your family.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
if you've got good blood and good juicy veins, and if you don't have good juicy veins,
Sign up.
start drinking water today
Right.
and get in here on
Get
Thursday or
here.
Thursday
Yeah,
or Saturday.
Wednesday or
Yeah,
Saturday.
Wednesday. I keep saying
Oh,
Thursday.
I know. Because I said Thursday originally.
I know it's Wednesday.
One last thing I do want to mention though,
Saturday.
because it is our 40th anniversary this year. So we have been serving the
Oh,
community
Wow.
since 1985. So, follow us on social media.
What's your
Sign
social
up for-
channels?
So we're at thecrisiscenter.org. So we're
Okay.
on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
And on Facebook, Instagram, are you Crisis Center
I think it's Crisis Center CO.
CO?
I should know that
Yeah.
better.
No,
We're
I
not that
think it
great
is.
with our
I think
Okay.
it is
Yeah.
CO.
Yeah.
Even if you just look up Crisis Center.
Yeah.
Go to the
It'll come-
website.
go to our
and it'll be
website
the
and then you can
links on there.
You can link to that. But yeah, follow us. We're doing some fun stuff. And and I just keep encouraging everyone. Donations of any kind are always
Are
accepted.
always helpful.
But $40 increments are great on our 40th anniversary.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yes.
So many people want to know, how do I plug in? How do I give back? How do I get involved in things? Just
Yeah.
get on that website and
Yes,
connect
yes.
somewhere
And
and say,
soon
"Yes, I
we'll
wanna
be
volunteer."
starting our Trivium program back up, which is wonderful. It's Latin for Crossroads, and you get to hear directly from direct service
That's
staff
cool.
about the 3 pillars of our services, the myths about domestic violence, the realities, and how we actually help clients in our actual community.
wow,
So it's a great donor information event that we'll be launching back again in probably April.
that's cool.
So
Well,
Yeah.
thank you both for what you guys.
thank you so
all
much
that
for
you
your
do.
time.
You guys do
And the
amazing work.
community you have built.
It is. It's an
wonderful.
amazing community here. We have great people, great organizations, and every day you meet magical people like this. Every
Yay.
day. So get in here at the village, and our neighborhood here has grown. It's kind of like Colorado everywhere. The neighborhoods have all grown.
Yeah.
There's a lot more traffic in our hallways. You do have to wait for coffee in line. No, you don't. Now we have 5 coffee kitchens instead of 1. So, hey, we got to keep traffic down.
That's
We're
right.
doing our part, just like
That's
CDOT,
right. Yeah.
to help traffic flow. But get in here to the village workspace, come down here tomorrow and give blood. Come on
Yay.
Saturday. We're having a huge wellness fair on Saturday. All kinds of fun events, lots of different vendor booths with wellness and mental health. There's going to be puppy adoption.
I know.
There's gonna
We're
a
going to be
blood
here. We
drive.
have a
There's gonna be-
table.
you have a table.
We are gonna
Crisis
be
Center's
here.
going to be
Yep,
here.
Yep.
I was hearing about all the things. I was like, wow, okay, there's a lot.
I know. It's amazing.
They're doing
they're amazing.
They're
I
doing
love
an
it.
almost complete building takeover.
Yeah, I love it.
We have a couple other events going on at the same time. So I said, well, you can't have these rooms here, but they're going to take over the whole space and do vendor booths everywhere. So, and you can find info on that at rockyourwellness.com. So Rock Your Wellness, or go on our website. We have links to all these things as well on our website. So thank you once
Okay,
again.
thank you
You
so
guys are wonderful.
much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Bye.